Hello, guys, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. And we are doing a duo episode because we're jealous of Morgan and she's
Mm.
in Italy. So,
She is in Italy, eating amazing gelato, seeing some very colorful houses. I mean, honestly, every single day she posts, like, this is what
something
Meg and I
new.
did today. Oh my gosh, all the places she's going. I'm like, people go to Italy and they're like, here's a couple photos of cool things we saw. Morgan's like, here's all the cool things we saw in the last 12 hours.
I'm hoping
Like,
we could
it's
do a Patreon
wild.
for that. That would be fun if we could get,
Yes.
yeah, Morgan to talk about her Italy trip because it sounds like, yeah, like you said, she's been jam packing so much stuff in a great way. So, that's been
So, friendly
fun.
reminder, you can find us on Patreon. Patreon.com/the legendary ladies. We've got some cool stuff planned for spooky
We
season.
do.
So if you are a patron at any level, you're going to start getting access to some really fun spooky stuff coming up. So join us, and you also can see by the time this episode comes out, we will have posted a video of Kat trying the tapatilla hot sauce here in San Diego back in July when it was still hot. Is it hot in New York right now? Because it's already starting to
It's
cool
still,
off.
yeah, it depends on the day. Some days are hotter. Like today, it felt like a summer day, and then the next day will be a little nippy. We don't really have fall anymore, so it's just
Climate
we go
change.
from really hot to cold. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's coming. Winter is coming. Honestly, we're getting the cold, which I don't love. I like the heat a little bit more. But let's get into this week's topic, which is Olivia Rodrigo. She had a new album come out, Guts, and it's a pop kind of rock album. And then I recommended to Amy Kesha's newest album. It's an
Mm-hmm.
album I feel like not a lot of people have been talking about. So I thought, well, Amy, you thought it'd be a fun idea to do a versus episode, and I thought it'd be fun to do one of the most popular albums of the year, most psyched up album versus an album not a lot of people are talking about. Again, underrated album. So we're going to talk about each and kind of get into it. But let's talk about our history with these artists. So Olivia Rodrigo, were you part of the craze or you just started now?
I know any song that may have been on TikTok or Instagram Reels, but that
Like
was the
Good For
extent of my
You and
knowledge. Yeah, things
Driver's
like that.
License.
Yeah. Other than that, like you would have said, have you listened to Olivia Rodrigo's newest album? I would have been like, hold on, let me Google who that is.
Okay, so
Obviously,
you wouldn't even,
yeah, I
yeah,
would not have recognized it, but that's kind of on brand for me.
true.
I feel like this is why I love working with you because you're like, listen to all these cool things. Like there's definitely new songs that are going to be on my repeats that I'm going to be listening to just from listening to these two albums
Sure.
over the course of the week. What
Yeah, no,
about
and
you?
so we'll start with Olivia Rodrigo and then we'll go into Kesha. But yeah, Olivia, I remember I'm also pulling up the albums. So when we do talk about them, we could actually look at like the tracks and stuff like that. But when that first song actually, the driver's license, when that hit, I remember turning on Twitter and like, what's driver's license? And I was like, what the hell is this? Why is everyone talking about this? And it was the day it hit. And I listened to it. I was like, oh yeah, that was a pretty cool song. Interesting. Don't know who Olivia Rodrigo is. And then like 2 weeks later, SNL started doing skits on it. I'm like, oh wow, this is a really popular song. That's really interesting. And then I started just listening more of Olivia's music because Driver's License was a single, I believe, and then her album came out. And what's interesting is Driver's License is such a popular song, could have been a one hit wonder, but Good For You is actually more streamed on Spotify. So that's actually a more popular song than Driver's
Interesting.
License, which is really interesting. So the album did really well. People really liked the idea, and maybe in a Taylor Swift way too, that this is just a normal teenage girl talking about teenage girl problems. And it's like, oh, it's been a while since we've had an artist like this. And we'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about like her influences and stuff like that and what happened with her sophomore year or sophomore album. So yeah, I like Olivia Rodrigo. She's also a Disney Channel star. So I had heard. I think she's from Bizarre Darks before this. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it was a show about like YouTube and what's his face, uh, Logan Paul's brother, whatever his face is, the
That I
brother.
can't help you with.
Yeah, Logan Paul's brother is. Jake Paul, he was in it, and they did a Disney Channel show. But then she was part of the High School Musical TV show. Then, as she got older, and then she did this song, and obviously left the High School Musical show. But she was a
Yeah.
Disney kid, which is interesting. And now Kesha, I grew up with Kesha. TikTok came out when I was in freshman year of high school, so I remember that. But then I never really thought about Kesha until I gotta look up the album name. The Red album. I forget the name of it, but the album's red. You see her body in the front of it, and I was like, oh wow, Kesha has layers. I always thought of her as the TikTok girl, and before TikTok, the app, like the actual
Mm-hmm.
song, I just thought of her as that. And then I listened to it, and I was like, whoa, she actually like kind of has this rock sound to it. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. And then fast forward to this album, a little, we won't go too much in the detail, but a little background. Sadly, her producer, Dr. Luke, did a lot of shit to her, both
Mm-hmm.
mentally, physically, everything. And this album is called Gag Order because she's still under that label technically. He wasn't really involved in the music, but she's still under his label. So that's
Mm.
why this is kind of a solo adventure, but it's also like I can't say much, so let me say this. And I just really love the album. I listened to it randomly. I must have been subscribed to her on YouTube, and I listened to Fine Line when that came out. I'm like, whoa, this is really, really good. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember showing people, and they're like, "Wow, you really like Kesha." And it's like, I don't know if I care about Kesha, but I was like, "No, this album's really good. I really wish people would listen to it." So that's kind of my history on both of them. I definitely know them enough, and I've been listening, weirdly enough, to both of them at the start of their career. And we'll talk about. Oh, let's talk about what do you think was the biggest difference between these two artists, or at least these two albums?
Um, I think if you look at it from a lyrical standpoint, there is very much a difference of, oh, there is a nearly 20-year difference in
Yeah,
these two individuals. Their life experiences are different. If you compare them just on a content standpoint, one is about teenage stuff and school and teenage, like it's very teen-y. It's very new adult, kind of at the end of YA, beginning of new adult, just starting to kind of coming of age. Kesha is, I have aged. I have been there. These are these stories. And yet at the same time, they both touch on things that you would think that a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old, you're like, no, they can't possibly have that in common. But there are points where they're both talking about body image, where they're both
mm-hmm.
talking about relationship challenges. And it is kind of interesting to compare the content and see the similarities despite the age gap. So yes,
Yeah,
you've got some songs that are talking about two very completely different things, but there's also a level of consistency between the two stories that honestly speaks volumes about just this day and age and growing up and what it's like when maybe you were stifled. Maybe you didn't get a chance to grow up because you had someone controlling your every move.
and being
So you
stars at a
can
young age too, because they're both
Yes,
they were both in the
yes.
limelight in a young
Yeah.
age.
I think musically there is something to be said about how Olivia Rodrigo's album basically had, in my opinion, two general
Yes,
themes.
yes,
There was
and
the rock
also
and banger
sounds. Yeah.
sounds, yeah. So there were just two. It was like she only had appetizers or desserts.
Mm-hmm.
Kesha's like, I got a 5-star or 5-course meal.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia's album had like her ballads and her kind of like chill vibes, meditative,
Like
almost
folky.
acoustic sounding, folky stuff. Yeah. And then she had her bangers and her rockin', and it was super rocky, and yeah, and all that kind of jazz. But then you had Kesha, and Kesha's had so many different layers. Each song was different from the last song. There was one point where I was like, oh, am I listening to Kesha anymore? Because this feels like old school Ingrid Michaelson. Like,
Right. And has
there's so
story
much
too.
variety.
The story is
Yes.
so different. With Olivia, I remember, okay, what's so interesting about Olivia, and I'm kind of showing my hand a little bit, but when I first heard the album, I didn't love it. I was just like, wow, this sounds really similar to the last one. She's saying almost the same exact things as the last one. She's upset at
Mm-hmm.
this guy and many guys and whatever. But then you do listen to it a little bit and you're like, okay, she has grown a little bit with her lyricism.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's interesting. There's a part where I'm angry that there's some songs that start out really folky and then go rock, but then there's a part where I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually her evolution, that she's like kind of putting both genres into the song. But I agree that I do think there's not many layers to it, where it's just like she's she does sound like Paramore a lot, but almost like a poppy version of Paramore. And because Paramore, I feel like does go more rock than Olivia, and you see Olivia's
Yeah.
influences a lot because she is. I kind of wish she leaned more into singer songwriter, and we talked about that with Miley as well, where it's just like
Mm-hmm.
I love the pop stuff, and it's interesting because I was talking to Marianne and Phil because we were packing today, and they're talking about Kesha, and they're saying, you know, they're talking about one of her like drunk songs from whatever, and they were talking about her poppy stuff. It's like, I love this because we can sing along to it. I'm like, I don't know if that's my favorite part of Kesha. I love when I feel something from Kesha where she's saying something to me. I could listen to anything about superficial, getting drunk, whatever. And yeah, I do want to see more songs about just having a fun time. But this is not on this album, but there's another song called Cowboy Blues where she talks about having fun and being in a club, but she's like, oh, I missed my chance with this guy. If I did say yes to him, what would have happened with my life? And so it's like, it's almost like I do miss the party days, but it's a somber version of that. And obviously we'll talk about that this album. I think it does that a lot too. So it's not being anti-party, because there's almost this trend of songs being anti-party, because Miley does it too, where she's like, I had my wild days. That's when I used to be young. But there's this
Mm-hmm.
nostalgia to it. It's like, I miss those days too. That made me. So I'm not regretting it. I feel like a lot of people have seen it as a regret. It's like, no, they're not regretting those things. They're just like, I'm a different person now.
Yeah. I've
Olivia's
had
still a
that
party
journey.
girl. I don't know if
She's
she actually
still,
is a
yeah,
party
she's
girl,
still
but
on the journey. There's
yeah.
also something too about kind of the opposite of what we were talking about with Selena Gomez, where Selena Gomez was like, okay, I'm sorry, maybe not the opposite, but kind of the same. Selena Gomez knows that this certain type of song is gonna sell. Olivia knows this certain type of song that I do is gonna sell.
Right.
And so I don't think she's quite at that point in her career where she's like, I can start doing some weird shit.
She wants
I
to be more
need
than one
to
hit wonder, you know?
yeah, she's like, I need to stick with what I know is going to sell and what's going to do well. And you look at even Taylor Swift and consider how similar some of her albums are. It's the same general idea. I think hopefully after this album, she'll start to have a little bit more freedom to create. I do wish that she would tap a little bit more into like actual physical guitar work and electric guitar work, because there were a
Yeah.
lot of really cool sounding quote riffs. There were a
Mhm.
lot of things where I was like, ooh, if this had been like in the AC/DC era, I could see them really rocking this on stage, or I could see her opening with this number. But it was computerized. It was not, if it was someone genuinely playing it, it didn't sound like it. And that means that they lost something in translation. I wanted to feel the musical effort behind it. Not to say that Kesha had, quote, a lot more like musicality to her or musicality complexity to hers, but there was so much more variety in the sound that I didn't get so trapped being like, oh my God, I'm listening to another song that has a little bit of like this, I played with it on GarageBand sound.
The
And Olivia's
producing could
album
be
did have a little
stronger.
bit of that. I think that might be it. Is that it just had it was a little juvenile in the musicality. I really wish that for a singer of her
Caliber.
caliber that you could be like, you know, this is Olivia Rodrigo and this is her band. And I think that's just me in general with everything right now, is that there's so much push towards computerization. There's so much push towards AI. And I have some very dear friends who that is their career. AI is what they do. Great. If that is the sound you want to create, go for it. But there's something about Olivia Rodrigo that speaks to her being able to be like, dude, I could rock this opening for Taylor Swift in Vegas. I want to see that. I want to feel that. I want to be like, dang, someone just played that in the studio. Wow, that's impressive.
Which is
Because I feel like I
interesting
miss
because
so much of that.
Selena Gomez had a band back in the day. It was called Selena Gomez and the Scene.
Oh,
So
I
she
did
did
not
have a
know
band.
that.
Yeah, she had a band
Where did
connected.
the bands go? And
I
you know
know
what?
where.
If I'm wrong, I would love for someone to be like, "Hey, you know what? Actually, she played all of this, or this is the guitar guy. This is her bassist." I would love that. Um,
I think you're
I
on the nose. I mean, I'm sure she like when she tours, there's probably a band behind
yeah.
her, but I don't know if it's a significant.
I think maybe that's just something in general that I wish was a little bit more prevalent these days, was general level of musicality and skill, which is why I don't know if you've ever I know I've talked about him before. There's an artist, Cody Fry, very
You
different
have,
vein. It's
yeah.
totally different. Like
I
you
think we listened
cannot
to
be
one of
like,
his
I would
songs.
listen to Kesha and Cody Fry and they're the same kind of thing. They're not. But whenever Cody records, he initially starts with not always, but a lot of times he starts with a computerized, like he does a digital composition. Then he rewrites it for orchestration, records it live with orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel it. Like the music videos have him recording with a 55 person orchestra. It goes from being like, wow, this is a beautifully written piece, to wow, this is a beautifully performed piece. And I think that's the difference. There's a difference between a wonderfully written and produced album and a wonderfully written and performed album. And
Sure.
I don't know if even either one of these would super qualify for that in my book, but I do think that to an extent, not super high level, but I do think that Kesha had a little bit more performance options because of the variety of the music on the album and
I
how it
recommend
differentiated.
you watching some of her live stuff. She has some live
I know she's a
performances, and they're
really
good.
strong musician.
Yeah. Well, even like they usually do not even live when I mean actually seeing them live. There's some where she released the album and they're like, let's do one where you see me singing.
Yeah.
And she does a really good job with it.
Yeah.
I think. Well, let's go from track to track. Well, not every track, but let's go to guts first and we'll go gag order. What I always like talking about is the opener, and I actually will talk about the opener of both. So All American Bitch is the opener of Olivia Rodrigo's album, and then we have Something to Believe in for Kesha. Um, Very interestingly, All American Bitch is kind of sounds like every other Olivia song. I don't think it really made a
Sure
big
does. Sure.
indentation.
Yep.
But also, like the theme is, it opens up your theme where it's like, okay, I'm your American teenager. Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
what it means to be an American teenager. And again, the thing that people liked about Olivia a lot when she was first introduced is that you do feel like she's, especially with the driver's license, more than the Rocky stuff, was that you felt like you're kind of just in a teenage girl's bedroom and just listening to
Yeah.
her play her guitar. And that's something I really like about her. And I like how raw she is in that way. So, I mean, she just kind of follows the lead on that. And I don't really think that this album really does anything for me until Bad Idea, right? I think, it's one of the singles. So, like, I've heard it a lot now. And Vampire was the
Mm-hmm.
first single. So I was like, oh, I'm familiar with this song. So I
Yeah.
already know it. I've heard it on the radio. Lacey, I know a lot of people like because it's like mysterious and kind of Taylor. Well, some people think it's about
Really
Taylor
like
Swift.
Lacey.
I like Lacey
Yeah.
too.
I like Lacey. I enjoyed that one, and I enjoyed Vampire. I You can't help but like the singles that have come out. Like I
Right.
think that if it's released as a single, it's because it's good. It's because they know it's one of the best of their albums. So of course we're all gonna like that one.
Getting Back's a new single that was released, and I like that one. That's like kind of I think the biggest earworm more than Vampire is Getting Back. One of my favorite songs though, because on her last album, one of my favorite songs was Two Step Forwards, Three Steps Back. It is this very not fun, but honestly more emotional guitar piece and an acoustic piece, and I really love it. There's a really good line in that. Let me actually pull it. Two steps forward that I always like think about. Olivia Rodrigo, hold on. And it's one step forward, three steps back. And the one of the lyrics that I think is fun is let's see, it's about a roll. It's one step forward, three steps back, and I'd leave you, but the roller coaster is all I've ever had. I'm like, oof, love that. I thought that's a great lyric. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, one of my favorite songs on here is probably Logical because it kind of reminds me of that song, the one step forward, three steps back, because it does slow things down because there's definitely a lot less slow down songs here. It's definitely more of like, I hate
Yeah.
this guy. he's gay. Or I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Whatever. Let me, it's very much like I hate this guy. That's really this whole entire album. Which obviously is what was popular about Driver's License. But I'm like, like I said, there's just not a ton of layers in this, even if musically it's interesting enough. But I don't know, because we're saying musically it's not very layered, but like lyrically, I don't know if it's layered either. I think it's poetic.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, the challenge with being a relatively new, young, you're still working on finding your own, your own self and your own style, is that you are somewhat limited. I think it'd be fun, which we're not going to do tonight, but I think it would be fun to go back and compare the second albums of some of the most famous people out there now. Like compare
Yeah.
the second albums of Taylor,
Lady
compare the
Gaga.
second album of Lady Gaga. Yeah. And look at and be like, okay, were we all right? What was that second album actually like? Was it leading towards the right track? Was it the leftover of who they were? Did they go completely off script, off book? Like, what was the goal here? I think that'd be kind of fun.
I
Anywho.
would love to do that. I think that'd be fun. Another artist I was thinking maybe we could do when once Morgan's back, a really popular newer artist that's come out and queer. We do a lot of queer stuff on here. Is Renee
Sure do.
Rapp. I think we should definitely. She has her new freshman album that just came out, so I think that could be
What
a
is
called Snow
what's her name?
Angel. I want to say Renee Rapp, Renee Rapp, Rapp. She's a Broadway singer. That's where she started. Now she's like a pop singer. She was in Mean Girls. She played Regina George. So
Oh, okay, okay.
she's
I'll have to
really
look it up now.
interesting. And now she's
Hey,
like
you know what?
becoming mhm.
I love any Broadway people who move to doing like solo work, because I'll be really honest, if you're on Broadway, you have some skills,
She has
and
a
I
really good
really
voice.
respect that.
Yeah, I think you'll like her a lot. I think she's cool. I think it'd be interesting to do her album. But yeah, going into Olivia, anything else from any of these tracks that kind of stick out to you?
I uh logical. I liked her quote ballady songs a little bit more than
Mm,
her punk rockery songs. I really
mm,
didn't. I don't think I would ever actively be like, I want to go listen to Teenage Dream or All American Bitch on a regular basis. But I do like Vampire. I do like Lacey. Logical was a lot of fun because Logical actually tells a story. I
right.
think that's and that's a challenge with just the kind of stuff that I like to listen to anyway, is I'm really picky about what kind of stories being told. If there are lyrics, I want a story that's going to touch me. And even composers that I love, even Cody Fry's new album that I was just listening to, he has a lyrical one, and I was like, this is just not great. The lyrics are just not great, and the music's nice, but the lyrics aren't good.
Right.
And I'm the kind of person that I'm like, I expect better, kind of a thing. Rest of the stuff's great on the album. Love it. Anywho, I think overall I enjoyed the album. I enjoyed listening to it. It was a bit of a quote background album. It
Yeah,
was
I
what I was
kept
listening to on the drive to work or while I'm cleaning the house. And every once in a while I'll tune in and be like, oh, that's a nice liner. Oh, okay, I like that musical bit. But it was very backgroundy.
I kept zoning out and not, I don't know, in a good or bad way, but I listened to it originally just not even knowing we were doing this podcast. I just want to listen to the album when it originally came out. And I remember I got halfway through and I got busy doing something else. And I was like, okay, I'll get back to it. And I listened to enough of it. And then obviously we did this podcast. So I listened to it a couple more times, especially today. Like I was just doing work and I was just listening to it. And I was like, man, let me listen to that song again. I didn't really pay attention. And there's a lot of those
Exactly.
because they all sound very
Yeah.
similar. So they all kind of blend in so much where I'm like, what's that song? What was
Mm-hmm.
it trying to say? Was it trying to say anything?
Yes, dude, spot on. Nail on the head
Yeah.
right there.
So let's get into Kesha gag order. Let's talk about the opener. This is an album that I actually really like as it goes on. I really like the later half, like the B side of the album, even more than the front side. But the first song is really interesting because for 40 seconds of it, the music is really low. So you can't really even hear like the audio very much, which is very interesting. So I think Amy got up, but I didn't see her get up because I was on another tab. So I'm sure she's coming. There she is.
Sorry, the coyotes in our neighborhood are going absolutely berserk, and my dog is also going berserk because of it. So he just
Yeah,
tried to jump out the door, and I was like, "The door is closed, like the
yeah,
screen
don't
door."
do that. Yeah,
He's like, "I could go through it," and I'm like, "You can, because you're 100 pounds. Please don't."
yeah, need the
Anywho,
air.
I did not hear what you just said. What did you
No,
just
so I was
say?
talking about the opening of the of gag order, which is something to
Okay.
believe in, which I found. I was saying I like the B side a lot more of this album, but this is an interesting opener because I feel like the first 40 seconds it's so low the music, and you're not even getting lyrics right away, which is super
I
interesting.
I kept restarting it because I thought
Hmm.
something was wrong with my Amazon Music. I was like, why is it why is it not playing? What's not wrong? What's not playing?
But I kind of like that, and so going
Mm-hmm.
into what I think makes this album, well, I think what makes this album is you really feel like you're talking to Kesha, right? Like her soul is being totally let out, which I really love about this. And I think she just talks about the struggles she's had without naming names, which makes it relatable to people, right? If you were saying like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Doctor whatever his name was, like he Dr. Luke, he did this, he did that. It's like I don't know if that would have been as powerful as, her saying, "My mom tweeted something, she's getting me in trouble," or she's like, "There's some days where people call makes me feel like I'm trash," you know? And I love when the first song I heard was Fine Line. I love that song. I think there's so much to analyze about it because it's this juxtaposition about how she feels she's the best and she has an ego, but then she's like, well, actually I'm not, there's a moment where I'm Jesus Christ, but then there's a moment where I feel horrible about myself. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's the story about being a woman, it's a story about being in this industry. It's just like she's never satisfied, she doesn't know how she there's just this fine line. I think it's just such a beautiful song, and I every single time I listen to it, it's like an onion. There's just so many layers to it, and just musically also the way it's the actual music I think is so well done and almost keeps you on the edge with that song.
Agreed. I think that there's it's complex. And I
Yeah,
like that. I think that it's complex and that that's what we expect from her at this point. I
right.
think that's what we expect and what we kind of not require, but we it needs to live up to that. And I think this does a good job of that.
Yeah, and so some of the other songs that I find interesting on here too, two of them in particular, "Eat the Acid" and "Only Love Can
Freaking
Save
love Eat
Us."
the Acid. I
Yeah, it's
love
good.
that song. Like,
Yeah,
first off, totally my jam, like music wise.
yeah.
Love that kind of stuff. Love listening to the lyrics. I was like, because the first time I heard it, she was saying, oh God, what's the line she repeats over and over again?
I'm looking it up now.
Ah.
You don't want to be changed like it changed me. That's
So
one that she does a
when
lot.
I first heard it, I heard, you don't want to be changed. Fine, I'll change me, is
Hmm.
how I originally heard it. And then I finally was like, oh no, that's not what she's saying, but it had the same general idea. And I was like, oh, I love stuff like that where you're like, I heard a couple different things and I'm not really sure how it went. And I really enjoyed that song. Anywho.
It also feels very much like a rebellion song, but if again you listen closer, it's more of like, man, you did a lot of shit to me. Fuck you. I'm sorry for the language, but what I feel like what's really interesting about both those songs, they're kind of old Kesha. If you really listen to Kesha, like old Kesha, TikTok, whatever, they're very like hyper, almost rap like, and there's a little bit of like grunge to it. Eat the Acid is
Mm-hmm.
really grungy but really poppy. And then one I think is very similar to her old songs is "Only Love Can Save Us Now." The beginning of it really sounds like an old Kesha song, and then it changes in the middle, and it's a song almost about God, right? And there's this orchestra. I mean, this orchid that plays in the background where you're like organ, not orchid, organ, not
I
orchid,
was trying to figure out where
not
you were going. I
orchid,
was like,
organ.
like, how do
So
you
it
play an
sounds like
orchid?
yeah, you play an orchid, you pull the petals. But no, and there's this organ in the background where you're like, whoa, you really feel like you're in church in for a second, and I really like those layers. I think I just love how it changes in the middle, and you're kind of shocked by it. So those two songs are really interesting because they play with a lot of nostalgia of Nick Kesha, but then the songs I particularly I'm really fond of is inter, inter, inter introspective songs where you get to
Mm-hmm.
see living in my head, obviously.
Yeah,
It's talking about
really,
living in
yeah.
your head. I think Too Far Gone is so good. It's honestly too short.
Mm-hmm.
Hate Me Harder, I think, is a really good song. And I love that this album ends on happy, because it's just like, you think it's a song that's just gonna be like, I'm happy, but it's like, no, but I want to forgive almost, right? She's like, I I want to be happy and I want to forget. I don't know if I will be able to. Which I find really interesting. It's still kind of sad. It's not a happy song.
Yeah. I think that that's the undertone of a lot of these things is you listen to it and you're like, "Wow, that hits." And I think that this album connects with me a little bit more personally.
Right.
That there's a lot of things where even if it's just a line here or a moment there where you're like, oh, yep, that's me. I feel that. I feel that fine line. I feel that living in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And you connect with that. And that is, again, something that I really value when I listen to these albums is I want a lyric that's going to connect with me. And I think what's nice about Kesha is that now that she is far enough in her career, now that she has told these stories, she gets a little bit, ironically, more freedom to tell these stories, even though she's still under a gag order, even though she's still not really able to tell everything. She can say just enough that the people who know get it. They understand what story is being told. And I really like that because I think it puts faith in your listeners. It's
Right.
like when we talk about television and we say show, don't tell. Trust your audience to figure out what story you're telling. Trust your audience that they're going to get what you're putting out there. And I like that she doesn't spell everything out.
Yeah.
That she's like, you know what? If you like, think about this. No, really, think
Fine
about
Line's
what
a
I'm
great
saying.
example of this. Fine Line's a
Yes.
great example.
And that's the complexity that I really enjoy. And it's not to say that Olivia Rodrigo's does not have that. There are points where she is great about it, but she's still a
Lacey.
very much, yeah, Lacey, exactly. But there's still a lot more tell and just this is the thing. These are what I'm saying. This is the story I'm telling. This is my journey. I like Kesha's is like, I went on a journey. I'm going to tell you some of the things, but you're going to know what I really mean by it. And I think that that's just the whole theme of the album. And I think that because those themes play into each other, it helps you kind of like you turn on that mindset. You go into this album being like, I'm going to listen. I'm really going to listen for what's hidden in there.
And I've been listening to this album almost on repeat ever since it's been released. And I still feel like I learn more about her and learn more about this album. And honestly, if you even look at it visually, the Olivia's album cover is a little boring. It's purple. I mean, it says guts. She has it on
Uh,
her. Mhm.
Kesha's makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, me too. And I
I
think
don't
it's
like it.
super in. Oh, but that's what I like about it, is that it makes
Yes,
me
I agree. I'm
uncomfortable.
like,
Yeah.
ooh, yeah.
Because you're like, oh, she's
It's a little much.
suffocating, but she's also
Yeah.
not. It's not like it's really interesting, because if you look at the bag, it's just laying on her, right? It's just
Uh huh.
laying. No one's actually suffocating her, because obviously she's kind of in this transition period,
Yeah.
that she's still under a gag order, but she's not being
Mm-hmm.
as suffocated as she was. And I find that being an interesting visual as well. And if you watch her, like, the visual lyric videos, she's like being buried alive and she's trying to get out, and it's just really edgy. And I think the thing that's a shame about this Kesha album is that, and not a shame to me, because I love the album, but I think maybe a shame to the general pop public, is that there's no commercial song, and that's really sad,
Yeah.
because I wish more people knew about this album. I wish more people were talking about it. I only know this album because I randomly saw it, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
subscribed to Kesha, and I saw Fine Line, and I was like, wow, I really like this song. I want to listen to the rest of the album, but no one's talking about this album.
I think that that's the challenge, and it goes back to what we talked about last time about how if you know something's gonna work, no reason to break the wheel. I think that Olivia's album has bangers. I think it rocks. I think that you listen to that album and people are going to be TikToking to it. There aren't really a lot of
Sure.
TikTokable songs on the Kesha album. And
No.
that's fine. If that's the story you're going to create. It's like the people who get famous for writing a book series And they're like, that actually wasn't my favorite story I ever wrote. My favorite story I ever wrote is this book that no one ever reads, but this is my baby. But y'all are here for this album, so I guess that's what you're going to be famous for. Maybe someone will listen to this. I think Kesha hopefully is at a point in her career, all around, where financially, lyrically, storytelling wise, she has a little bit more freedom to write something like this. Olivia certainly does not have that yet. She is still coming of age in her, like, in the music industry. And so she has to have songs that will stay as the, number top 10 hits on the radio. She
I
needs
wonder.
those radio hits. And
Let me.
I think she does really well with them. I enjoy it. I think Vampire did exceedingly well.
Let's see what's on the Billboard right now. Where
And
Vampire is number one.
yep, see? And I do remember listening to Vampire, and it popped up on, like, just a shuffle on my phone, and I was like, oh, what's this song? Oh, who did this? Like, I remember that, and I like that. I don't know if any of these Kesha songs, besides maybe Eat the Acid, I don't know if any of these Kesha songs would have made me be like, oh. I think I had to go in knowing the album, knowing the artist, knowing what was happening, and then being able to read it and enjoy it. Again, it's kind of like being like, all right, well, I know this author writes good stuff. Does this book look interesting to me? Not really, but I'm going to read it because I trust the author.
Yeah, it's a harder
I think
sell.
you listen to this. Yeah, you listen to this album because you trust the artist. I think that Olivia did an exceptionally good job of selling her brand and making people go to her album from that one song. I think she did very well with that. I think, like, business wise and brand wise, she did exceptionally well with this.
Yeah, because she made more of what worked for sure. It's kind of like the Taylor Swift effect, like you said. Like she did so many like country-esque albums until she went to pop. And then she realized, okay, pop, I could do a couple of these. And then she's like, all right, let's do folk now. And then, you release something like Lover, where it's like, okay, it's kind of a mix of both. And then you release Midnights, it's like kind of pop. And you get a little bit, like you kind of get a little bit of everything with Midnights, and you kind of could do whatever you want. Um, yeah, it's interesting. And I think with Kesha too, it's like maybe there's a reality where she want to make it that popular? No, because it's still kind of attached to that other producer. I don't know what the money situation is with that, but I don't think she really had to make a banger. She just like wants to make music, which I think there's something special in that. But let's get into, yeah, what in the long run, what was your favorite album? What did you get from these
Um,
two? Now
I
as just
think
Amy.
I think I will listen to the Kesha one on repeat more, but I do think that I of all the songs, Vampire and Lacey are very high on my list. Eat the Acid is very high on my list. The drama
Drama's
is
good.
not.
Oh, you
Like,
didn't like it?
it
I
was
like
it
the
was
drama.
I didn't dislike it. It was just a little too loud for me at sometimes. Um but I think both of these I enjoy listening to. And that's nice because there are some points where we listen to something, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to listen to that again. I will listen to both of these albums again.
This
And
is
I
not
enjoy
Selena
that.
Gomez.
So, yes. So thank you, Kat, for introducing me to both of these albums.
And
What
no,
about
I'm
you?
yeah, no, I'm
Obviously, you love the Kesha one.
yeah, no, the Kesha one I'll be listening to 10 years later, and I'll still be listening to that album. I just love it. Guts, I think there are gonna be certain songs that will play on my YouTube mix just because it's a popular song and I won't say no to it. But am I gonna be going looking for it? I don't know. I don't know if there's any songs here that I'm like really like, oh, I gotta really listen to that one again. Maybe in the next couple of months I'll realize I've
Yeah.
listened to it enough and I'll be like, actually I do really like Get 'Em Back. I think Get 'Em Back might be one I'll go back to, if any of them. Lacey, maybe. Vampire, obviously, that's kind of already happened because it's been out for a while where it's like
Mm-hmm.
on my YouTube mix and I'm not complaining it's on there, but it's also not one where I'm like, oh, I gotta go search Vampire. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess that's the part that's a shame because, again, I really listened to her last album on repeat because I wanted to go back to those songs. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really get that here, but that doesn't mean this isn't a successful album. And I think it's successful to the people she was targeting. I think
Mm-hmm.
Kesha,
Yes.
like you were saying, Kesha's kind of targeting. I want to. I don't even know if I want to say adults. I think she's targeting like people who really like music, like people who are really in
Yeah.
tune to the industry. I don't. Yeah, I don't even think she's not even targeting the casual fan. She really is targeting people who have followed her journey. And people who are her loyal
Or
fans.
or people who want to be challenged when they're listening to something.
Sure.
People who are not looking for a background album. They are
Right.
looking for something to listen to on a car ride where they're listening to the whole thing.
Sure.
Um, and I think to an extent, something like Midnight's had a little bit of that too with Taylor. There were some songs where, you know, you went in this being like, this is a Taylor album. I'm gonna listen to this, and I'm waiting for that moment where you're like, this is why I listened.
I'm not
This
complaining
is
for
it.
Antihero. I'll always listen to
Yeah,
Antihero and be like, I'm having a fun
exactly.
time with this. Because even Antihero, which is such a pop radio song and it was made to be a single, there's
Uh,
so many interesting lines. I still think about the, like,
yeah,
oh, I'm the sexy baby. And you're like, oh, that's just such an interesting line where
yeah.
it makes me think a little bit. And you think about Taylor as a human being of being an antihero. So I like that. Going to Olivia. You know, it's funny because again, I was talking to my friends about this who aren't like Phil is listening to some Olivia songs, like, oh, put on driver's license, I'll listen to that. Like he's more of
Mm-hmm.
like, I want to hear the radio hit. And then Marianne, she's like, oh yeah, I'll listen to the that one radio hit that sounded like Paramore, but I don't want to listen to the new album, and I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
there's much to the new album. And she kind of brought a point that I kind of agree with. It's like it is for teens, right? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. We're
I'm
not
not
the
the
right
target
audience.
audience. Yeah, I'm not. But
Mm-hmm.
Taylor is such an interesting artist in a way that she's for everybody. And like, how is she for everybody, but Olivia Rodrigo isn't? Because I was talking to like one of my friends, who's he reads comics, so like his daughter is like a dancer, and he has said, "Oh, I got Taylor tickets." And I was expecting him to be more negative about it and being like, "Oh yeah, I'm like kind of going for my daughter," but he's like, "No, I like Taylor. Like I think she's a good singer." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." That's not like I didn't expect that coming from you. And just everyone, I won't say everyone loves Taylor, but like every generation knows her and could like her, you know. And I don't think Olivia, I think a lot of parents will go be like, yeah, okay, I'll go see Olivia. And it's gonna be more of like, I'm taking my kid to see Olivia than Taylor. Like, oh, I also want to see Taylor Swift.
Yeah, but that's challenging because you're talking about someone who's a new artist versus someone
Sure.
who has had
And is older.
so much
Yeah.
story. And quite frankly, Taylor has earned it.
Hmm.
Like she's earned people being like, you know what? I respect her for this. I respect her for that, for her music, for her performance skills, for things that she did outside of the world. Like I respect her choices on this. Olivia's just too young to have created that sort of like quote respect clout for upper generations. Um
Yeah.
I think
I'm
I think that as she grows and as again I think once we've gotten past the second album, as she starts to hopefully diverge and create more variety in her musicality, I think she's going to start grabbing more people because if you think about it, if Taylor had only ever stayed in the country scene, would you and I be into it?
No, probably
Probably
not. I mean,
not.
I liked our song. I liked the Tim McGraw stuff, but I don't think I
Mhm.
would be like she's the, maybe possibly one of
Yeah.
the greatest artists to exist. And I'm speaking on a commercial level, not on an artistic level. I do think she's a great artist, but I'm sure there's like better artists out there. But commercially, I think she
Yeah.
might be one of the biggest artists to ever exist. I truly do. Um, it's interesting because like I'm thinking about like I'm trying to think of an artist that's the age of Olivia, and this is a different field, but I think I don't know. Have you watched any Jenna Ortega, like the Wednesday show? She's the lead of Wednesday.
Uh I don't think so.
She's an actress who also is in Disney around the same time as Olivia Rodrigo, and they're actually like friends. And she's in Wednesday. She was in this movie Fallout, which is like about like a school shooting. She's in Scream. She's was an X. She was in a lot of movies, and she has a real range. And maybe it's hard to compare when it's like someone's an actor and someone's writing words for you compared to like a musician who's kind of writing her own words, which is cool that she's lyrically writing her own stuff. She's like, "Oh yeah, like a lot of my songs come from conversations I had with my friends." And she's like, "Oh, that's a cool line. I'll write that down." I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." That again,
Yeah.
getting to a head of a teenage girl, but then I think of Jenna Ortega, and I'm like, "Whoa, she's just so talented, but she's so young." And it's just like, but you could tell she has so much range. But I know it's two different outlets. One's acting and one's singing. And no one's saying
Yeah.
Olivia's a bad singer because I think her voice is really good. I
Yeah.
think it's just more of like her art might need to grow.
I agree. I think that it's just too early. You know, you're comparing we're comparing quite literally two generations of artists.
Hmm.
So it's hard to be like this versus that because it really is two very different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoy chatting about these. I enjoy talking about the differences between these two because overall, I think both of them had really solid albums. I liked listening to both of them. There were songs on each of them where I was like, yeah, and some where I was like, skip again. But overall, I think that both of these albums, if they pop up, I'm gonna listen to them. There are certain tracks from each one that I will actively go to, and I think that that is the sign of a good album anyway. I think that's
No,
great.
I agree. And I think both have a story to tell. They might have different stories to tell, but that's always a sign of a good album is that so there's some albums where I'm like, what the hell are you trying to even say? Like, what's your story? But even if Olivia's is a simple story, it's just like, what does it mean to be a teenage girl? That's your theme, and
Mm-hmm.
she follows through. And then
Yeah.
obviously with Kesha, she's talking about the time of being in a gag order, and how that feels. And there's a story in both of them. But yeah, let's start wrapping up. If you guys like these, let us know. I think I would like to do the Renee rap one next. I think that'd be fun. Maybe we could do like another verse. I think the verses is always fun because it's just like then you get to compare it to something else. I think even Taylor. I mean, Taylor, you probably could have done a whole podcast, but I think what was so fun about
Yeah.
that one is that we got to verse it with Carly Rae.
Yeah, that was fun.
So I have to think about who we're versing Renee rap. I don't know. She's a very maybe Fletcher. I think she's the only one I could compare her to. Like Fletcher's also a queer singer. Um, Fletcher sadly has Lyme disease, so she's gonna be in the outs for a while. Yeah, it's a shame.
Jeez.
Yeah, shame about that artist is that she started. And I promise we'll end it after this. This is a small tangent, but she started her career and she started becoming like popular-ish with one of her songs right before COVID. And
Huh.
she was supposed to tour with like one of the One Direction people. And you were like, oh wow, she did that. She probably would become even more popular. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like it took her a little bit more it took her more time because of COVID. And then she's like, cool,
Yeah.
now she just sang with Miley Cyrus during New Year's, so maybe she's becoming more popular. And now she has Lyme disease. And you're like, damn, is this girl ever gonna be like a household name? She deserves it. She's a great singer. But Renee Rapp, she's now in that trajectory of she might be like she's starting to Marianne was watching the VMAs and she's like, "Oh, I know Renee Rapp because of Kat and Julius. He knows the artist too. So I was like, oh, I know because of them, and because she was watching with her friends. And it's interesting. He's like, oh, cool. Now, like maybe this is a time because she was on the VMAs. Like people are starting to get to know her. You're like, oh, that's interesting. I just like kind of listened to her. I just liked her style. She's bi, so I was like, oh, support a fellow bi artist. Um, anyways, maybe we'll do an episode on that. And when Morgan is back, and because Morgan likes music too, we just needed to do something. I was like, oh, this is something we could do. And also,
Oh,
the
I love
album just
this.
came out. Yeah,
Yeah.
so and that's what's so fun about the Legendary Ladies podcast is that we could kind of cover whatever we want. So it's fun. And we'll be doing our spooky season next. Well, we have to think of one more episode
Yes.
before that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Kitchen Nightmares.
Yes. That's right. We are going to be watching the Kitchen's Nightmares premiere, and then we're going to talk about it. I don't even know how we're going to like review that kind of episode. Be like, oh my God, that was so disgusting. And oh my gosh, this guy. It's just more going to be like tea time with the Legendary Ladies.
Well, I think it's also going to be the interesting conversation of what happens when you have a show return, especially a reality show, because you see like the Fuller Houses or whatever, and you're like, wow, this is a different type of show. But like when a
Yeah.
reality show comes out, you're like, oh, and then also there's a lot of baggage that comes to it too, because this is coming out because of SAG and all the strike stuff, and because the writer
Yeah.
strike. So I think there's a conversation to that. I'm excited about
I'm very
that one.
excited.
Rachel says,
Uh,
which episode of Kitchen Nightmares? Well, if we were doing a random episode, I would do the Amy. Actually, when we were doing packing, we were watching it in the background. I think it was Amy's Bakery. I think that's what it's called.
yeah, that was the one I want to look up.
Yeah, that's like the big episode. But we're doing the premiere, so we're doing the newest premiere. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about Amy's Bakery at the same time. So we'll be doing that next week.
Amy's Baking Company.
Baking
Yeah.
Company. There you go. I literally was just watching it. It's a classic episode. It's really good. And I think I want to say Hell's Kitchen's coming back too, which I'm very excited for. I'm like the only human being I feel like that watches that show, but I love it. It's just my comfy show. Um
But yeah, so
uh
Kat, what do you got going on in your real life?
in my real life, well, reality television, no. But yeah, the dancer has a Kickstarter going on. It's the last issue of the book, which is really exciting. This book's been done for a really long time, so it's interesting to look back, look at young Kat and see what she wrote and why she wrote it. It was like I wrote that book when I was out of college, and I felt lost, and I was like, this is, I need to follow up to another book, and you could kind of see old Cat in it, so it's kind of fun to kind of finally release it and look back at what it was all
Mhm.
about. So go check it out. It's the last issue and I'm not writing anymore. So I there's it's interesting because there's always all these books like Fallout Daughter, which I started in college, and it's like, no, I want to continue writing this because I love superheroes, but this book was always a beginning, middle, and end. And I think I leave maybe a little room for it to have another thing, but it won't be anytime soon. So it's fun to have something that it's like, no, this ends, because we live in a society where nothing ends.
I personally really appreciate that. My favorite
Thank
thing
you.
is when a TV show is like, you know what, season 3, season 4, that's the last. We're
Yeah.
gonna round things off because it's very satisfying. So I appreciate it, and I'm very excited
Thank
for
you. Thank
the
you.
final chapter, so to speak.
Yeah. So that's on Kickstarter. It's on Kickstarter until like mid October. So go check it out. And that's about it. I'm not doing any traveling just yet. So that's good. No Comic Cons. Get a little bit of relaxation. How
And
about you?
you guys can find me performing in Welcome to Sleepy Hollow,
Yes.
a haunting musical thriller in Oceanside, California, down here in San Diego. It is October 6th through the 29th, so almost the entirety of October, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, with matinees on Saturdays and Sundays. I am playing Katrina Van Tassel, which has been very interesting because we're just talking about like different generations. I have to like I am much older than the character that was written. We did age her up a little bit, so she's like college kid Katrina Van Tassel,
Wow. That's a big
but
difference though.
still, I ain't no college kid anymore.
No, yeah.
Um, so it's been very interesting to kind of step back into
You're no
like
Olivia Rodrigo.
no, I am not. And it's challenging because there are certain things you want to fall into and be like, oh, as an actress, this is how I play young. I do this with my voice, or I do that with my voice. But it's more about the energy you bring to the character and the excitement and the kind of unrestrained excitement at certain points where you're, college kids, you're like, just take a
Right.
chill pill for a hot second. There are points where my girl need to take a chill pill, and that's okay. But I have enjoyed it, and we're 2 weeks out from opening, and I just got a message during our when we were recording from the email. She's like, all right, the official off book date is this. No more calling for line after
Wow.
Monday, this coming Monday. And I was like, the director told us that we had another week. And so I'm like
Right.
panicking right now. I like grabbed my script. I'm like, what lines do I not know yet? Um,
Right.
so it's
And
been a
how
lot of
long is
fun.
the show?
It's gonna be about that's a good question. I think it's gonna end up being about like a nearly 2 hour show
Yeah. And that's
with
a lot.
the intermission. So I don't know. Well, I honestly don't
I guess
know.
that is a little shorter. Like a Broadway
Uh
show with intermissions, usually like 2 hours and 45 or so, I would
you
say.
know, I actually I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if I timed the full run through yet because we haven't had a chance to do a full run
Mm.
through completely yet because there have been some songs, we had some illnesses and some people have been out. Anywho, once we finally get to doing a full run through on Sunday, we will find out. And here's the best part. Our costumes are going to be steampunk. I get to wear
There you
multiple
go.
corsets.
I'm
I'm
excited
very
for
excited.
you on that
I
one.
know you
That
are.
seems like a dream.
Morgan will be very excited to talk about the costumes.
Yeah, I might not be excited to talk about it, but I'm excited for you to wear it.
Yes, I am very excited for my multiple corsets and my knee-high lace heels that I get to wear. So I'm getting costume fitted in a couple days to see the final thing. I also get a wig, which I'm super excited about because if anyone's ever done theater, is putting on a wig, is it kind of kind of heavy, kind of sweaty? Yes. Is there something really nice about knowing that you don't have to do your hair before the show?
That's
Oh,
very
yes,
nice.
there
Is it because it's
is.
like is it a different hair color or?
Yeah, she's gonna be blonde, but also it's
Got
gonna be
you.
like a different style. But
Mm,
literally, there are some days where I am coming straight from one job to a performance, and so in the
right,
car ride, I can at least put my hair in like the pin curls that will go
right.
underneath the wig. So I'll show up looking ridiculous, but it's so nice to be like, whoosh, whoosh, done. Pin, done. It's just great. But yeah, she's blonde. So
That's
yeah,
that's another
the
reason for the
biggest.
wig, but
That's the biggest one. Golden haired Katrina Van Tassel. I wish she actually had an accent. She does not. But yeah,
Next
very
time.
excited. October 6th through the 29th. If you're interested, oceansidetheater.org. Spelled the fancy way, Oceanside Theatre, TheAtre.org for tickets.
No, go check it out. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back next week. And stay legendary.